Good day. Yesterday, Wednesday, 7th April 2021, a telephone conversation took place between Chinese President Xi Jinping and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The Chinese media, or to be more precise, China's official news agency, Xinhua, have provided an incredibly and exceptionally detailed readout of the conversation. We've had nothing similar in detail from the German side, but there is no reason to think that the readout from Xinhua is wrong in any basic particular. I'm going to read it in full and then I'm going to discuss it because, in my opinion, this is an extraordinarily important call and it begs many questions, some of which I'm going to try over the course of this program to answer. This is what the readout published by the Xinhua news agency, which I reiterate is China's official news agency. This is how it reads. Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday urged Germany and the European Union to make joint efforts with China to protect and promote the healthy and stable development of their cooperation so as to bring more certainty and stability to the volatile world. Xi made the remarks in a phone conversation with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The Chinese president stressed that he and Merkel have communicated for several times last year, which has played an important leading role for the development of China-Germany and China-EU relations. Enhancing China-Germany and China-EU cooperation could produce major results with significance. Xi pointed out that China-Germany pragmatic cooperation, despite of disturbance generated by the pandemic, among other issues, has made progress whilst maintaining stability, with China being Germany's largest global trading partner for the fifth consecutive year, which demonstrates the resilience and potential of their cooperation. Xi said that he hopes that both sides will promote their cooperation in various fields in the spirit of mutual respect, mutual benefit and win-win in order to inject confidence and impetus to the China-EU cooperation and the revitalization of the world economy. China is actively building a new development paradigm, Xi said, adding that China is relying on its own strength for development while sticking to opening up and actively participating in international division of labor and cooperation. China is willing to share the opportunities brought about by its new round of opening up and development with foreign companies, including those from Germany. Xi said he hopes that Germany will remain open and create more convenience for the enterprises of both countries to expand mutually beneficial cooperation. Xi also encouraged the two sides to take the 50th anniversary of the establishment of China-Germany diplomatic relations next year and the Beijing Winter Olympics as an opportunity to promote exchanges in such fields as science and technology, education, culture, and sports. Noting that China-EU relations are facing new opportunities as well as various challenges, Xi said that the key is to keep the general direction and keynote of China-EU relations from a strategic perspective, respect each other and remove distractions. Xi said China's development has been an opportunity for the EU and urged the EU to make correct judgment independently and truly achieve strategic autonomy. China stands ready to work with the EU to ensure the success of a series of important political agendas for the next stage through consultation, deepen and expand practical cooperation across the board, strengthen communication on climate change and other global governance issues, and jointly practice multilateralism. Medications are used to prevent diseases and save lives, Xi said, stressing that China opposes the politicization of medications and medication nationalism and stands ready to work with Germany and the international community as a whole to promote fair and reasonable medication distribution, support and help developing countries to obtain medications, and contribute to humankind's common fight against the pandemic for an early victory. For her part, Merkel said that the EU upholds independence in its foreign relations. The world today faces many problems and challenges, which all the more call for Germany, China, and EU-China cooperation to address together. Strengthening EU-China dialogue and cooperation is not only in the interests of both sides, but also beneficial to the world, Merkel said, adding that Germany is willing to play a positive role in this regard. The German side attaches importance to China's 14th five-year plan, expecting it to bring new and important opportunities for Germany, China, and EU-China cooperation. Germany is willing to work with China to prepare for a new round of Germany-China intergovernmental consultations, resume personnel exchanges at an early date, and strengthen exchanges and cooperations in such fields as the fight against the pandemic, climate change, and biodiversity, Merkel said, adding that Germany hopes to maintain communication with China on issues such as fair distribution and mutual recognition of anti-pandemic medications. Merkel finished by adding that her country stands ready to contribute to the success of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity to be held this year in Kunming, China. My goodness, that was, as I said, just about the longest readout of a telephone conversation between world leaders that I have ever read. But it is extremely interesting in that it shows the way in which diplomacy is currently being conducted by China and, if you like, by the Eurasian bloc at a time when East-West relationships are fracturing, when it looks as if we are working towards a standoff between the United States and its allies on the one hand, and between the China, Russia, possibly Iran, or soon to be Iran, Eurasia bloc on the other. And it's quite clear that Xi Jinping and the Chinese think that there is still a prospect of at least winning Germany, if not exactly to their side, at least keeping Germany friendly to themselves and preventing Germany from drifting into a confrontation against China and indeed by extension Russia in a way that is desired by some people in the United States. Now let's pass some of the points that Xi Jinping made over the course of the call. Firstly, he went out of his way to stress the importance of China-Germany pragmatic cooperation, as he put it, in maintaining stability, not just between themselves, but also internationally as well. And this is the key point that I made right at the beginning of this program, when Xi Jinping says that German-Chinese relations are playing a role in maintaining international stability. What he is saying is that if Germany continues to maintain some distance from the United States in the context of the current anti-Chinese campaign, as the Chinese see it, in the US and in parts of the West, then that will preserve stability in world relations. So he is telling Merkel that it is Germany that is going to play a key role in future as to whether or not the present China-US rivalry and the present Eurasia-US alliance rivalry is going to evolve into an outright Cold War. If Germany maintains its relationship with China, and if the EU maintains its relationship with China, then it's possible that we will still see a world that is fracturing, which is far more adversarial between the two great power blocs, but an outright Cold War, such as that which existed between the Soviet Union and its allies and the United States and its allies, will be avoided, and global stability and international security will be enhanced. And Xi Jinping then went out of his way to point out to Merkel the enormous advantages to Germany that would accrue from such a position. Firstly, he pointed out that China is now Germany's largest global trading partner and has been so for the 5th consecutive year. He then also discussed China's own development program. He pointed out that China is relying on its own strength for development while sticking to opening up and actively participating in international division of labor and cooperation. So he said that though China will now rely on its own resources to develop its economy, it's still open to trade with other countries, and there are ample opportunities for German companies to continue to do business in China, as they have been doing, and to make money there and to develop their economy that way. He also held out to Germany various other opportunities for cooperation. He talked about cooperation in fields of science and technology, education and culture, and such like. And interestingly, and perhaps most importantly of all, there was this paragraph. Xi said China's development has been an opportunity for the EU, and urged the EU to make correct judgment independently and truly achieve strategic autonomy. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, in correct judgment independently from whom, and achieve strategic autonomy. Autonomy from whom? Well, he is clearly here referring to the United States, even if the readout doesn't say that explicitly. What he is saying to Merkel, what Xi is saying to Merkel, is that if Germany makes its own independent decisions and pursues strategic autonomy from the US, then Germany, and by extension the EU, will achieve or help to achieve world global stability, and also will achieve greater economic prosperity through their closer economic and trading links with China. By contrast, if Germany and the EU do as the US wants them to do, joins this alliance of democracies against China that the Biden-Harris administration and Secretary of State Blinken is talking about, then global stability will fracture and deteriorate. Germany, and by extension the EU, will lose their opportunities for further trade and business with China, damaging the prospects of their own economy, and at the same time, they will become ever more closely subordinated to the dictates of the United States. They will become part of a US-led bloc and will not be able to achieve an independent policy which is geared towards German and European interests. So that is what Xi Jinping is saying. It is an extraordinarily important call, and it's perhaps the one which lays it out for the Germans and the Europeans more closely and deeply and intensively than probably any other call either Merkel or any other European leader has achieved. Germany and Europe are at a crossroads. They can either do what the US tells them and ramp up their hostility and opposition to China, and by extension to Russia also, in which case they will lose trading opportunities and trading autonomy and see themselves relegated as second-string players to the United States, as was to a great extent true during the Cold War, or they can forge ahead independently, but continue to develop close economic relations with China, and by extension, by the way, with Russia, build up their economies that way, and become independent countries. That is the alternative, the choice that Xi Jinping is offering was offering Merkel, and by extension, the EU and the Europeans. And interestingly, Merkel, who, whatever else she is certainly no fool, seems to have grasped the implications of what Xi Jinping was saying, and does not seem to have responded by lecturing Xi Jinping on human rights issues or values. There's no word of any of that in this readout, and does not seem to have taken any position of absolute and complete loyalty to the United States. Again, the readout says nothing about the United States. It is as if Merkel also never referred to it. Instead, what we read from the readout is the following. Merkel said that the EU upholds independence in its foreign relations. The world today faces many problems and challenges which all the more call for Germany-China and EU-China cooperation to address together. So, that would appear to suggest that Merkel agreed with Xi Jinping that Germany does need to pursue a more independent line from the US, and that the EU, by extension, should do so also, and that this is important because of the many problems the world faces, many problems and challenges, which would be better addressed if Germany, China, EU, China worked upon them together. And she then goes on to say, at least the readout goes on to say, strengthening EU-China dialogue and cooperation is not only in the interests of both sides, but also beneficial to the world. So it looks as if Merkel agreed with Xi Jinping that it is important to avoid a situation where the world does divide into blocks in the way that it did during the Cold War. And it is also important to for the maintenance of international peace and stability, from which Germany, as a major trading economy, benefits, that dialogue be maintained, and that means Germany maintaining its dialogue with China, and it also means Germany, and by extension the EU, maintaining and achieving strategic autonomy and independence in the making of its foreign policy from the United States. And we learned finally that Merkel said that Germany hopes to maintain with a communication with China on all issues such as fair distribution and mutual recognition of anti-pandemic medications. So, a fascinating call. Now, the great problem with this is that there's no doubt at all that Xi Jinping means every word that he says. I mean, he clearly was trying to impress on Merkel the importance of Germany in its own interests and in the EU's interests, maintaining a dialogue with China and by extension with Russia, and preserving its strategic autonomy and its independence of the US. The big unanswered and unanswerable question is that did Merkel, when she appears to have responded positively to all the things that Xi Jinping said, did she mean it? And of course, here we don't know, because Merkel is one of these extraordinary people who is very skilled at telling others what she thinks they want to hear. So it would not be at all surprising if Merkel is at one and the same time assuring Xi Jinping that Germany and the EU definitely want to uphold independence in their foreign relations and want to work closely with China on all sorts of issues, and that at the same time she, or rather her officials, are assuring Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Antony Blinken that, of course, Germany stands shoulder to shoulder with the US against the new rising authoritarian powers in the East, led, of course, by China. So it's entirely possible that Merkel is saying different things to different people. At the same time, one has to wonder how important anything Merkel says at this point actually is. She's only going to be Chancellor of Germany for a few more months. Her authority within Germany is disintegrating. She is becoming increasingly unpopular, and her government, as I've discussed in previous programs on this channel, seems to be in an advanced state of decay. It's far from certain, as I speak at this moment in time, who is going to succeed her as Chancellor when she finally retires in September, and whether indeed her Christian Democratic Union Party and its CSU ally will even be part of the government in September. So it could very well be that anything that Merkel says, whether to Xi Jinping or to Joe Biden or to Kamala Harris or to Antony Blinken at this point in time, doesn't really matter very much. On balance, though, I have to say I think that is unlikely, because the points that Xi Jinping made to Merkel are, on the face of it, irrefutable. Germany is a major trading power. It does need to trade with countries like Russia and even more with China. It needs Russian gas. It needs access to the Russian-Chinese market. It needs to work with the Chinese on joint investment programs. It needs indeed to restart its major investment program in Russia, which was curtailed so badly following the Ukrainian crisis in 2014. Moreover, that is the consensus view of Germany's mighty business community, who are known to be extremely unhappy both by the sanctions which were imposed on them in 2014 in relation to Russia at the peak of the Ukrainian crisis, and who are also extremely unhappy at the way in which they're being pressured by the US to cut back on Germany's trading relations with China. Moreover, the Germans unquestionably have been looking at the devastating effect that Chinese sanctions, or I should say counter-sanctions, are having on certain key Western businesses. Now, I did a brief video dispatch about this, a program about this, a few days ago, in which I discussed the effect of the Chinese counter-sanctions on certain companies. And previously, I also discussed the effect of Chinese counter-sanctions on British activists and law firms and law chambers, which have also been involved in campaigning on the Xinjiang issue. And since I made that program, we've had more information on the latter, with an article in the Financial Times which discussed the effect of the Chinese sanctions on Essex Court Chambers, one of the leading barristers' chambers in the United Kingdom and one of the world's leading commercial barristers' chambers. And what we learned from the Financial Times is that one of its most senior mediation partners has quit that chambers and has now switched to a different chambers, presumably to avoid the effect of the China sanctions, that the Singapore branch of Essex Court Chambers has now broken away and has announced that it is forming an independent entity that will continue, presumably, its business with China independently of the parent company in London, and that Essex Court Chambers is also finding it increasingly difficult to do business in the Caribbean, where so many of these offshore tax havens and commercial enterprises are based, and where commercial chambers obviously need to be heavily involved, because the sort of people who use these tax havens are precisely the sort of people who are most concerned to do business with China. So Essex Court Chambers appears, on the strength of this article in the Financial Times, to have taken a serious hit. Well, German businesses, which are heavily invested in China, will be looking at that. They'll be weighing what that means. They will be saying to themselves, we don't want to go there. We lost a huge amount of business when the sanctions were imposed on Russia and took a big hit from that. The Chinese market and the Chinese business is far bigger for us. China, as Xi Jinping reminded Putin, has for the 5th consecutive year been Germany's biggest trading partner. They will not want, the German business community will not want to jeopardize that. So it's possible, it's likely, in my opinion, that when Merkel says that the Germany and the EU will pursue foreign policy independence, what Xi Jinping called strategic autonomy, she meant that for real, and that will be Germany's policy in future. In other words, that Germany will begin to distance itself on matters of foreign policy, and specifically on foreign policy with respect to China and ultimately with respect to Russia from the United States, and will not be willing, to the extent that it was previously, to take its directives from the neocons in Washington. There's already, by the way, been a very negative reaction to this readout from parts of the US media. I read an outraged article about it in the Washington Examiner, written from a neocon point of view, which said that Merkel deserves China's Friendship Medal on the strength of what is said in this readout. Now, there is another thing that has happened which might also point to Germany starting to put distance between itself and neocon policies in Washington. I spoke a few days ago about the French-German statement on Ukraine, the way it was extraordinarily evenly balanced, refusing to blame Russia for escalating the crisis, making it perfectly clear that Paris and Berlin oppose a Ukrainian offensive in eastern Ukraine, do not want to see an escalation of the crisis, and in effect called on both sides, which in practical terms means on Ukraine, to exercise restraint in this situation. It's very interesting that in the days after that statement appeared, published by Germany and France, certain NATO countries had a summit meeting, or a virtual summit meeting, to discuss the situation in Ukraine. The meeting was actually convened by Ben Wallace, who is Britain's Secretary of Defence, and it included people like Lloyd Austin, who is the US Defence Secretary, and also officials from certain other Western and NATO countries. But very interestingly, this meeting did not take place with Germany and France participating. So it was not a NATO meeting. It was not a US-EU meeting. It was a meeting of a group of countries that are particularly close and see themselves as particularly closely aligned to the United States, and which certainly are not interested in pursuing strategic autonomy or foreign policy independence from the United States. By the way, what limited information we have about this meeting suggests that its results were inconclusive, and that some of the European states, particularly Britain, which wanted to take a harder line against Russia on this question of Ukraine, found that the United States was very reluctant to agree. But that's not the issue of this program. The point is that we are starting to see a division within Europe between states that consider themselves still very bound up with the Western alliance and the Germans and the French, who appear to be edging towards what Xi Jinping spoke about: strategic autonomy and foreign policy independence. Well, we will see how this is going to turn out. There's been instances in the past when the French and the Germans especially, and indeed the Italians and the Spanish, also seemed to be willing to put distance between themselves and the Americans on foreign policy issues. There was, for example, the episode of the Iraq War, where France and Germany quite openly opposed the Bush administration's plan to invade Iraq, at the same time that Britain, under Tony Blair, was strongly in favour and was actively involved in the invasion itself. But what has always happened in the past is that that the French-German concerns have been overridden by the need in the end to preserve Western unity. This time it may be different, and the reason it may be different is because the economic connections between Germany and China, and Germany and by extension Russia, are so much stronger than they have ever been in the past, and because, to say it frankly, no one in Germany really perceives a military threat from Russia or China today as they once certainly did from the Soviet Union. I'm going to add one last observation to this program, which is that the Russians, surely coincidentally with this call between Xi Jinping and Angela Merkel, about which they have undoubtedly been thoroughly briefed by the Chinese, once again have floated over the last few days their Greater Eurasia project. This is an idea of creating a single economic trading system, bringing together China, Central Europe, and Russia, with trade in goods and services essentially moving relatively freely between all its various parts. This, of course, based upon a principle of international peace and stability in a way that would not be consistent, obviously, with the new Cold War. Now, the Russians, and specifically Putin himself, have floated this Greater Eurasia project on several occasions. They've repeatedly found the Europeans uninterested. But the fact that they are talking about it again suggests that in the follow-up to the Merkel Xi Jinping call, they think there might be some mileage in reminding the Europeans, and specifically the Germans, of it. So, we shall see what comes of all of this. Probably it will take some time before we fully know. I suspect that there is a debate going on within Germany, not so much probably within government, but within the various think tanks and foreign policy institutes that exist there, and within the various business associations and groups also, about how they should respond to these Chinese initiatives. Should they do what Xi Jinping and also, it must be said, Vladimir Putin are urging them to do, seek strategic independence and autonomy from the United States, not perhaps break fully the alliance with the United States, but at least put distance between themselves and the United States so that they don't loyally and automatically follow whatever policies are decided for them in Washington? Or do they once again, as they have repeatedly done in the past, revert to that position of absolute loyalty to Washington, to the United States, even if doing so goes against German and European interests? This is going to be a hugely important issue. It may not decide in and of itself and by itself the future of the world. Germany and Europe are not as important as they once were, but nonetheless, its importance should not be underestimated. Germany holds it within its hands to decide whether or not the present period of international tension and superpower confrontation between the United States on the one hand and China-Russia on the other does degenerate into an outright Cold War. It is for the Germans to decide. They have never been in a position of such importance and such power since the end of the Second World War. It is the first real opportunity for Germany to play a major role in international affairs since then. We shall see whether the Germans have the imagination and the strength and the flair and the courage to take it. Thank you for joining me in this program. Please check me out on my other channels, the channel that I do with my colleague and friend Alex Christoforou at the Duran. Please also check Alex's channel, and please check also the new channel where we show you our interactions with our viewers on our live streams. Please also check us out on our various other platforms, BitChute, Library, Rumble, and especially Odyssey. please, you'll find links, by the way, under this video. Please also, to the extent that you can, support us through Patreon, Subscribestar, and PayPal. You will also find links to that under this video. And remember, we accept donations in all forms of currencies, including the new currencies, including, by the way, Bitcoin, if you can extend to that. And also look us up on our Discord server. You can join us there. And also remember to check out, obviously, our shop with its famous merchandise that you will find there, our great magic mugs, our amazing t-shirts, our superb hoodies, our sweatshirts like the one I'm wearing at the moment, our hats, and all the rest. And thank you for joining me for this program, and I look forward to you joining me in future programs on this channel. Please remember to check your subscription. Please remember to check your subscription to all our channels. And I look forward to you joining me again. And until then, have a wonderful day.